take you through a case study on how we leveraged weather-based storytelling to impact business decisions. So, show of hands, how many of you checked the weather before you packed for Malaga? Good, and it was relatively accurate, I'd say. What's fascinating, though, is just how complex weather is. It's contextual. We don't feel weather as 75 degrees. We feel it as hot and humid or cold and damp. It's also pretty personal. What I would consider a nice, beautiful day as a New Yorker visiting Malaga might be different from somebody who's a local and experiencing this all the time. And it's also temporal. What I would consider a nice, beautiful day in July is going to be very different from what I'd experience in February. So it's very, very complex, and there's lots of nuances involved with weather and its influence. It can also be very significant in terms of impacting businesses. The weather can have a direct impact on sales. It can also change the tenor of an ad or make a marketing or sales strategy successful or not. And for one of our clients, weather was particularly important. It was one of the most significant drivers of business performance. So significant, complex, and they had absolutely no control over it. To add to that, this particular client is in the lawn and gardens category. So they have a very short window in which to hit their sales. Roughly 80% of their business is sold over a 100-day window. Added to that, they have a portfolio of brands. So their lawn fertilizer products, for example, can't be spread when it's raining. They also have bug and weed prevention products, which do quite well when it's hot and muggy. So there's a lot of complexity there in terms of how to manage their portfolio with these different weather conditions. Added to that is the regional dynamics. The United States is a big country, and you've got a lot of different weather conditions happening all at the same time. So for this client, weather was a pretty big challenge, and for most of the organization, a pretty big headache, because they were having problems predicting it, they were having no control over it. The challenge for us was how do we take this problem and turn it into an asset? How do we take a lot of data and leverage data science to separate signal from noise and make actionable insights, and capitalize on the opportunities and minimize on the waste due to weather? And we needed to do this in a way that we could transform how the whole organization is making decisions, and do this all on a real-time basis as the weather is evolving and the business is moving forward.
So in order to solve this challenge, this led us to the creation of Helio, which is a weather-driven demand solution that has really transformed the way that our client thinks about the weather, the way they make decisions, and the way they inform their strategies. So one of the things that we've coached them on, what they've been able to see with Helio, is that the weather can be a lot like the stock market. Think about it. The stock market goes up, a lot of people make money. The stock market goes down, a small group of people still make money because they know how to respond. And that's the exact same type of attitude they've adopted towards the weather now. Good weather can be an asset. Bad weather can also be an asset if you know how to respond to it. And Helio delivers that to them by giving them two things. One, it gives them the numbers that they need, but more importantly, it gives them the narrative. So at a snapshot, they can see what is happening with the weather, and they can see how their consumers are and going to respond to it. So they have this narrative that they can take to their internal teams, their executive teams, their strategic partners, and go in there and say, like, hey, here's what's going to happen with the weather. Here's how our consumers are going to respond, so here's what we need to do about it. And of course, all this comes through the machine learning and the algorithms that we develop, because we're mining a lot of very complex data and a lot of very significant interactions that are happening at the hyper-local level. One example here, this is for a specific market, for a specific product in a specific week. We're able to see what is the consumer's response to changes in temperature or precipitation, for that fact, at each point in time for each product. And what's great is that these insights have been used across the whole organization. Media marketing team, they know when to plan the media start dates, when and where to heavy up. Direct-to-consumer can better optimize the app experience, know which products to target. Sales, they know where to put the boots on the ground farther in advance, where to deploy promotional staff. Product, improving the customer experience. Supply chain can know 4 months in advance now where they need to have the product to go so they avoid wastage. And finance, has a better lens into what's going to happen with their earnings to inform those quarterly projections for Wall Street. So what is the actual impact of this? Now, when we launched in January of last year, we knew that April, historically their biggest month, they were facing some significant headwinds and looking at double-digit losses in their biggest month of the year. And in fact, played out almost exactly as expected. Can't give you the specific numbers, but the difference between those bars is about 0.5%. So thankfully, having 4 months warning for this, they were able to take action. They were able to shift their media start dates or TV start dates to later in the season, into May, when they knew the consumer demand was going to be there. They were able to pull back on some of their assets. They weren't wasting their marketing assets at a time when the consumer demand simply wasn't going to be there. And so how did it play out? Biggest sales month ever in the history of the company. Represented a $30 million opportunity just by capitalizing on the weather that was there. And so the key takeaways of this are that, number one, the weather is extremely complex. We can experience it as consumers, not in terms of specific numbers, okay? And that any weather outcome can be an asset if you have the right intelligence. And the value of data is in the story that it has to tell. Data by itself is just information. The value of it comes from the learnings that you can extract from it, the story that lies in there, and that's what you can get to if you have the right approach. Working on this project, we were constantly thinking of this quote by Louis Pasteur. It said, "Chance favors a prepared mind." And when you're planning around the weather and how people are going to respond, yeah, chance is a pretty big part of your calculus, right? So we're very proud to say that with Helio now, our client is well prepared for anything that chance has in store for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, are there any questions?
Quick question regarding the data on weather. What kind of variables did you use, if you can share more precisely? Was it temperature? Was it humidity? Was it what? So
Sure.
weather is a kind of a bunch of things. If you could elaborate a little bit on that.
So in our historical data set, we had everything from temperature, precipitation, solar radiation, dew point, all that. But looking forward, all we had was temperature and precipitation. So that's really what we focused it on. And so what was really critical then is when we were building out our analysis, did a lot of feature engineering. We spent a lot of time just looking at creating these different weather profiles. So not only just temperature, but what is the temperature in this week and what was it the last 2 weeks? Has there been an extended warm period or cool period? There's a nice day, but has this been after a succession of nice days? And things of that nature. So with just temperature and precipitation, we were able to create a lot of significant features that ended up creating these weather profiles across the continental US.
Hi, can you talk a little bit more about the geographic segmentation, like what was the deepest level you went in terms of geography? And the second question is, in terms of dependent variables, did you look at anything else besides sales?
Sure. In terms of geography, so this was all built at the DMA level, which is the Nielsen marketing regions in the United States. And we had the ability, and we started, the weather data that we can get can go down to a half-kilometer grid. So we can get super, super accurate and hyper-local with these forecasts, but then also roll it up to, in this case, we ended up at the DMA level because that's how they do their planning. That's what was most relevant for them. So we had the ability to go super local, but we roll it up to the levels where they could actually take action on it. And for the dependent variable, we look primarily at sales, but now we're also thinking about more things. There's a concept called like growing degree days, which is like how many like nice like seasonal days are there and which plants can grow. And so now we're working with their science teams to better help inform those projections as well, so they know when products are going to be growing. Are they going to be spreading earlier or later in the season? And so they can better target then with things like products that fight these types of weeds. So they know when those weeds are going to be growing, so now they know when to target them sooner in the season.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Katie and Brendan.